Hey everyone, this is Jorge Soto and you're watching Startups Unedited.
Why don't you take a second to kind of just tell the audience a little bit about your background and, how'd you actually get involved with startups and sales and all the amazing stuff you're doing right now?
Sure. Well, that could take the entire episode, but started sales right out of school and working in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area in Oakland, selling computers. And at that time, that was sort of I hate to date myself, but pre-PCs. And did that, door-to-door, business-to-business, selling mini computers. Then early 80s, moved and went to work at Apple. And that's sort of from there, then I got recruited to go to a startup, which was really sort of my first startup. We had a company that was making the first battery-powered laptop computer, if you can imagine that. And so then did startups. I think I did 7 different venture-funded startups before starting my own business in the year 2000, which was really designed to take the lessons I learned as how do you sell large complex products when you're a startup, no brand, no track record, competing against the big guys. How do you do it and win? And take that methodology and apply it to other startups and non-tech businesses as well. And that sort of led me up till about 2012, where I published my first book. And since then, I've really been much more focused on public speaking. I do my podcast, which is a 5-day-a-week sales podcast called Accelerate. Actually going to 6 days a week starting July 1. And
which I love tremendously.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad you like it. So yeah, we talk. For me, it's great because I get to talk with all these incredibly smart people doing really great things and learn a lot in the process. And hopefully everybody that's listening to it is learning it as well. So yeah, I guess I'm sort of I sort of hate the word, but thought leader in the sales space, published 2 books and got actually 2 more I'm working on right now. And just helping really mostly small, mid-sized businesses and startups sort of get themselves organized from a mindset perspective of how they're going to grow sales.
And you and I met in 2011 in Boston. We did an event together.
Well, I think it was later than that, actually, probably 2013. But
was it the last time? Yeah.
So, but yeah, in Boston, Cambridge, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about what is it like to be an entrepreneur? Like, what is it really like? Well, there's varying degrees of entrepreneur. That's sort of, for me, I'm an entrepreneur. I've had my own business for 16 years now. And it's really different because I'm not, as I consciously wasn't building a big organization, right? I wasn't trying to build a company, a product company, a service company like that. It's had its own ups and downs, as you might expect. Some days you're wondering where you're going to find that next client. But I've been pretty fortunate in that regard. But I think for entrepreneurs that are starting a product company or service company, like a SaaS company or something, it's a tough world out there because there's no shortage of competition. And that's finding out who they're selling to, why people are going to pay money for what they do, is the toughest challenge I think that most entrepreneurs have. Is they've got an idea, but how does that translate into something somebody's willing to pay for? And it takes time.
And what are some tips that you would provide, let's say, a founder around just getting started to plan towards trying to determine who is that ideal buyer?
Go out and talk to customers. I think too many people try to do it remotely, or you've got a technical founder that doesn't, is not comfortable selling, doesn't want to get out and, not necessarily doesn't want to, but doesn't maybe feel that that's their strength. I tell you, every company I've worked for, the entrepreneur that started the company is always the best salesperson for the company. Nonstop. Always works. And so they need to get out and start talking to people because they need to understand what the process is like, what the value proposition is. They've got to take that idea and translate it into something that's meaningful to something that somebody wants to pay for. And they have to start with that.
Awesome. Now, you've been doing a lot of fantastic stuff in the social selling space. What is social selling, in your opinion? And how can people get started with simply leveraging social media to launch their products, launch their personal brand, really start to generate some momentum online around what they're doing, essentially?
Well, I think you really nailed it on the head. It's you're establishing some form of authority around yourself or expertise around yourself. And social's a great way to do that. I mean, it's easy enough to create content these days, whether it's a short video, whether it's a series of Snapchats telling a story, whether it's LinkedIn and just being consistent and posting to LinkedIn on a subject that's relevant to what you're selling. It's just, or even sharing content on LinkedIn or on Twitter, or commenting on other people's. It's so easy to do. And so you really, as a lot of the books talk about, is you have to make sure you just set aside a block in your schedule every day that we're going to focus on this, whether it's, hey, today I'm going to write a blog. I'm going to publish that blog on my blog, and I'm going to post on LinkedIn. I'm going to share it on Twitter, and I'm going to post on my Facebook feed. Set aside the time to create the content, curate content if you're sharing, and post it. And it really doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, initially it might seem a little daunting if you don't think you're a good writer, but start with something short. What's something that's important to you, or use a tool like Facebook Live and just record a simple video that you can post out there. Just start somewhere and then commit to spending a certain amount of time every day, and you'll start building followers. And if you engage with people, they'll engage back.
So there's been a lot of discussion around, leveraging social media for sales or generating leads and these sorts of things. And sales leaders ask me all the time, and founders, et cetera, well, do I have my entire company on social? Like, what's the balance between just having salespeople and how do you actually start to track attribution, and then just having everyone on there? And a lot of the time, the employees don't want to share their personal, information, or have their personal, Twitter handle on or involved with some sort of company oriented initiative or whatnot. What advice would you give, those individuals when they're trying to think about, well, how do we ask everyone, and who's actually going to be participating in this social selling, essentially strategy, right? Where you're,
Sure.
combining these things.
Well, I think that you raise a good point. It's hard to get everybody to commit, throughout the company. So start with people that need to do it, which is, could be senior management. Certainly it's if you have one person selling, or if you're one person marketing, if you're assuming you're right at the beginning, if you're a little bit more advanced, the sales team, the marketing team. But the value really, we talked about, it's establishing brand authority, or authority around your brand, or authority around your field of endeavor. And it's also about starting to build relationships. And people should think about it less as selling and more about relationship building, because you're really trying to do is open a door to a conversation. So that's, to me, what social selling is. How do I open a door? How do I make a connection with somebody that opens the door to a conversation that's relevant to them and meaningful for me about my product? It'll take place on the phone or face to face or via email, but it's not going to be necessarily conducted through the social platform itself. But it's making that connection and trying to build that relationship.
I love that relationship building, because it's all about relationships. I mean, geez, in my opinion, right?
It's interesting, right? I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think we're seeing, maybe the ramifications, the outgrowth of so much automation coming into sales and marketing, that there are certainly some people that think that relationship isn't as important as it was before. But I think it's important to define what we mean by relationship, because back in the old days, back in the 1900s, quote unquote, old days, there was more, especially in more of a complex B2B sale, there certainly was an emphasis on a personal relationship with the buyer, that actually an emphasis on personal, meaning hey, let's go to lunch, let's say, we'll play golf, so on and so forth. But there's certain areas where that's still true, but by and large, what we're seeing certainly in tech B2B sales and so on, that's not as prevalent as it was. So sales are a little more transactional, especially service-based products, but the relationship is still very critical. But it's a different type of relationship. It's really, what have you done for me lately type relationship, right? I mean, the whole idea that people, using the phrase, people buy from those they know, like, and trust. What does that like mean? Well, it doesn't mean that you're best buddies or exchanging Christmas cards. It's that it's almost like they don't dislike you, right? But you're providing something of value to them. So you're starting to build that trust factor. And if they see that you're there in the role of a service provider to help them get their job done, which is to make a good decision quickly on the product and services they're evaluating, then you start establishing that sort of next level down relationship, that like and that trust aspect of things. So, I think social selling gets oversold to some degree, and then undersold in the sense that it's just really effective. People try it from too much of a heavy sales perspective, and it doesn't work, so they drop it. Whereas people are really consistent about saying, look, it's about making the connections, it's about starting to build the relationships, about opening the door to a conversation, and they're consistent with it, then they have success.
Awesome. Andy Paul, thank you so much for joining us. If folks want to,
pleasure.
Speaking of social, if folks want to reach you on social media, what are the best channels and handles?
LinkedIn, and if you search, it's after the /, it's Zero Time Selling. There's multiple Andy Pauls out there. And on Twitter, it's also at Zero Time Selling. So you spell it zero, ZEROTIME, selling. And then email me at andy@zerotimeselling.com. And you can visit my website at andypaul.com. And lastly, listen to my podcast. It's called Accelerate with an exclamation mark. And you can find that on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and every place else.
Awesome. Andy Paul, thank you so much. It's always great to see you. I'd love to come down to San Diego when you're down there. I know you're traveling all the time, but maybe I can coerce you into going, grabbing a drink and hitting the beach.
Certainly a margarita would be in order, yeah.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.